Welcome to BIO113, the Enzyme Lab. The Enzyme Lab is found here. It may not necessarily say 04 for you, but you click on it. The Enzyme Lab is one of the first one that's going to be conceptually a little bit more challenging than the others. So pay attention to the lecture, think through it, and if you don't get it conceptually the first time around, don't despair. Um, Sometimes it takes twice for this one. So as usually, you click into the overview. We talk about the general principles involved here. And then what you're going to do here is you're going to apply the principles of the scientific method to perform an experiment. And we're going to vary different variables in different experiments, and we're going to find things out about proteins in the process. And you're supposed to learn a little bit about enzyme kinetics. We're going to use a spectrophotometer to read the data. And then we're going to talk a little bit about enzyme kinetics and the kind of curves you produce in the process. This is where the walkthrough is going to be. And your tasks are going to be similar to the way they normally are. You read the lab handout about the enzymes. There's a lecture. There's a lab instructions. There are lab instructions. I highly recommend that you watch the lab instructions. There is a lab stress simulation. It's a little more in depth than what we do in the lab, so don't despair on the lab stress simulation if you're getting lost on that one. You're going to be tested on the things that are going to be in Blackboard. There's a quiz on the lecture materials. And then there is the lab handout quiz, which is usually, as usually, is the handout just filled out. On the next page, you're going to find, as usually, the lab handout, and I'm just going to go over that real quick. Lab handout is right here. Here's where the lecture is. I highly recommend you listen to it. But your lab handout, we'll just go through it real quick so you see what you're looking at. Your question set is here, which is the second part of the lab handout, which is where the questions are. But you're going to turn the questions in the form of a quiz. But the lab handout, so if we were, this is basically what the lab handout is all about. If we were in the lab, you would be making up, we would be taking a potato and mushing it up. And in the potato is this enzyme called polyphenol oxidase, and you can read all about that in the lab handout itself. In the lab, we'd mush this thing up, and then we would put this enzyme on ice to preserve its activity. And then all the experiments that you're going to do, you would be doing in the lab with this enzyme in the tube. The experiments you're doing are here. The first one, you're checking for specificity by comparing the activity of the enzyme with the actual product, with the actual substrate that it likes, and a couple of other substrates, and then we're going to compare the results. Then we're going to, and we're going to learn how to use a spectrophotometer, how to read with reading those samples. Then we're going to have a couple of different temperature setups, and you're going to put the solutions in at a couple of different temperatures to look if differences in temperature have an influence on enzyme activity. And then here is two of the samples, the 100-degree and the 0-degree. You're going to re-incubate at the same temperature. Here's we're going to test pH, if pH makes a difference to enzyme activity. And then these are thought experiments. We're not actually going to do that experiment. The impact of substrate concentration of enzyme activity and enzyme concentration on enzyme activity. Um, and you're turning in all of those questions. And like I said, here I explain the background. People tend to struggle a little bit with this handout, so make sure you watch the demo. I go over every part of the experiment here, and that should really help you walk through. This is how a spectrophotometer works. If all else fails, this is one of those places where sometimes people have to end up at the questions and answers page under enzymes. And especially the temperature activity, people tend to get a little confused about. So look at this first, and then if you still don't get it, let me know, and we'll see if we can figure out a way to explain it. Um, that's that, and then as usually, your assignments, so the lab handout can be found here again, same place as before. Questions set same way. You have a lecture quiz. You have a lab question handout quiz, which is the handout questions. And then you have an enzyme kinetics labster assignment, and all of those can be found in the following couple of tabs. And that's it for this week.